Aya Wilson didn't just stir the pot. She lit a fire and walked away. Her bold claim that she could beat NBA players one-on-one wasn't a casual comment. It was a direct challenge to the credibility and competitiveness of elite male. Unsurprisingly, this sparked a series of reactions from male players like Josh Hart and Patrick Beverley, not because they were threatened, but because Wilson's statement demanded a response. The debate exploded after Beverley's questionable pandering and Michael Porter Jr.'s blunt dismissal. But what's being conveniently ignored is that none of it would have happened without Wilson initiating it. When someone makes that kind of claim on a public stage, pushback isn't misogyny. It's accountability. If you're here for the real story and not the filtered version, subscribe. And if you're sticking around for the next meltdown, you better definitely subscribe. What makes this moment so telling is the way it exposed the fragility behind performative ambition. Wilson's defenders, including Angel McCree, framed the backlash as evidence of male insecurity. But that narrative falls apart under scrutiny. Wilson. The real issue here is Wilson made a provocative, competitive statement and expected applause, not critique. Instead of owning the consequences, the conversation has been warped to suggest men were the aggressors. That kind of evasion not only undermines Wilson's claim, it reinforces the very double standards she hoped to challenge. Aya Wilson didn't just start a debate. She lit a match and tossed it into a room filled with gasoline. And when the flames hit back, suddenly, the conversation became about everything else but what actually happened. It all started with one claim. One bold, unfiltered, eyebrow-raising declaration from Aya Wilson that she could take NBA players one-on-one. Just like that, the internet erupted. The sports world split in half. And for a moment, everyone forgot this wasn't the first time a take like this had floated around. But what made this different is how loudly the conversation spiraled, and how quickly the story got twisted. Let's be clear right out of the gate. This wasn't some innocent, what if thrown into the void. Aya's statement wasn't subtle, it wasn't vague, and it wasn't plucked out of thin air. It was a direct challenge, wrapped in bravado, and immediately put male athletes in the crosshairs. She made a competitive claim. That's fine. Athletes are allowed to talk trash. But when the responses started rolling in, honest ones, blunt ones, even pandering ones, the backlash landed squarely on the men. Suddenly, they were the problem, not the claim, not the provocation. Them. Michael Porter Jr. What followed was a carousel of reactions that said more about double standards than they did about basketball. Male players like Josh Hart and Patrick Beverley chimed in. Beverley, in typical internet-friendly fashion, leaned all the way into the drama, saying Wilson could beat NBA players, clearly baiting for clicks, likes, and maybe some brownie points. But Michael Porter Jr., he wasn't having it. He stepped in with a brutally honest response, cutting through the noise by saying what plenty were probably thinking, that he's been destroying women in basketball since middle school. Harsh? Yes. Unnecessary? Maybe. But dishonest? Not really. It wasn't a dig at women in sports. It was a rebuttal to a claim. That's the part that keeps getting ignored. Wilson issued a challenge, and men responded to it. They weren't just out here randomly attacking female athletes for fun. The conversation wasn't about hating women or being intimidated by their success. It was about a very specific claim and whether it could hold up under scrutiny. But here's where things took an even more chaotic turn. Enter Angel McCree, another former WNBA player, stepping in to defend her own. But instead of addressing the core of the issue, she detonated a monologue filled with emotional appeals, accusations, and generalized anger at men as a whole. She accused them of being obsessed with female athletes, of needing to tear women down, of being unable to handle the idea of a dominant female competitor. It was intense. It was dramatic, but it wasn't accurate. Because the truth is, most of the men involved weren't randomly weighing in to disrespect anyone. They were reacting directly to Aya's initial statement, and they had every right to. When someone throws down a challenge, you're allowed to respond. But McCree skipped over that crucial piece of context and launched into a completely different narrative, one that painted the men as aggressors and the women as victims of yet another insecure male meltdown. Let's stop right there. That framing? Completely backwards. Wilson, the real issue here isn't male fragility. It's selective outrage. Wilson made a bold claim, and when people disagreed, especially men, they were branded as insecure or sexist. Suddenly, this wasn't about sports anymore. It was about gender roles, biological differences, domestic responsibilities, as if pointing out the basic athletic disparity between the NBA and WNBA is somehow oppressive, as if disagreeing with a competitive claim means you're trying to silence women or deny their value. Let's not confuse ambition with reality. Aya Wilson is a powerhouse in the WNBA. No one's disputing that. But claiming she could take on NBA players one-on-one isn't just ambitious. It's misleading. And when she made that statement publicly, on a platform where professional athletes and fans would obviously respond, she opened the door to criticism. That comes with the territory. You can't throw a punch and cry foul when someone swings back. Yet, the responses from people like Beverly and McCree tried to reroute the conversation into emotional terrain. Beverly leaned into the fake support role, acting like Wilson's claim was totally plausible. But let's be honest, that's not respect. That's pandering. He wasn't trying to uplift women's sports. He was chasing engagement, clout dunking for retweets. Then Porter Jr. responded, and the tone shifted again. His comment wasn't about uplifting or dismissing. It was about cutting through the nonsense. And when that hit the timeline, it sent McCree into full defense mode. Her passionate rant circled around men's supposed obsession with women in sports, biological strength differences, the emotional labor of motherhood, and other points that had absolutely nothing to do with the original debate. The conversation had officially left the building. Wilson, and that's the core issue here. The debate wasn't started by men. It wasn't about undermining women. It was about reacting to a very specific, very bold claim. But when the blowback came, the story was rebranded. Men weren't just responding, they were attacking. Women weren't just offending, they were being silenced. The narrative was twisted into a morality play, where logic was replaced with feelings and competitive analysis was replaced with identity politics. At the heart of it all is a massive double standard. When female athletes make bold claims, they're celebrated as fearless, as trailblazers, as icons. But when those claims are challenged, suddenly we're not allowed to engage without being labeled haters. There's no middle ground, no space for honest conversation. It's either support everything or stay silent. That's not equality. That's insulation. And Wilson, knowingly or not, played right into that shield. Her statement wasn't just a throwaway line. It reignited a long-standing tension between men's and women's sports. And the moment it got pushed back, the defense team rolled in not to debate, but to reframe the whole argument. That's not how discussions work. If you make a claim, you invite scrutiny. And if you want respect, it has to go both ways. What makes this whole situation even messier is how the timeline keeps getting rewritten. Suddenly, the male athletes are being painted as if they started this fight. That's just false. Wilson lit the fuse. Beverly fanned the flames. And Porter Jr.? He tossed in the fire extinguisher and then got blamed for the blaze. We can't keep doing this. Where female athletes are allowed to throw out provocations, and the moment someone disagrees, the conversation turns into a therapy session about gender roles and systemic oppression. That's not a debate. That's deflection. There's a conversation to be had about respect, representation, and fair treatment in sports. But this wasn't it. This was a distraction disguised as a debate, a way to stir drama without actually engaging the core issue, whether Aya Wilson's claim was realistic. And if we're being honest, it wasn't. No matter how talented, hardworking, or decorated Wilson is in the WNBA, the physical and skill gap between the NBA and WNBA isn't something you can tweet away. That's not misogyny. That's physics. That's not hate. It's math. And pretending otherwise doesn't elevate women's sports. It just undermines credibility. At the end of the day, the real damage here isn't to Wilson's reputation or McCree's rant credibility. It's to the conversation itself. Because every time we blur the lines between critique and cruelty, between honest debate and gender warfare, we lose ground. We stop being able to talk about sports like sports. Everything becomes political. Everything becomes personal. And in the background of all this noise, the original point fades away. Aya Wilson made a claim. People responded. Some agreed. Some didn't. That's how dialogue works. But what we got instead was a distorted circus where facts didn't matter and context was left on the bench. If we want progress, it starts with accountability. Not just for men who respond honestly, but for women who make bold claims and then dodge the consequences. Because equality means taking the hits when they come. It means stepping into the arena and playing the full game, not just celebrating when the scoreboard looks good. So what do you think? Was Wilson being confident or just unrealistic? Were the male responses justified or out of line? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you're here for full breakdown of messy sports debates, chaotic controversies, and internet drama that refuses to die, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. We're just getting started. All right, let's keep going because this mess, it's far from over. The most frustrating part of this entire saga isn't that Aya Wilson made a bold claim. It's that once the backlash started rolling in, no one wanted to talk about what was said. They just wanted to talk about how people felt about it. And that's the ultimate dodge. Wilson stood on a public platform, said she could take NBA players one-on-one, and then stepped back like the internet wasn't going to eat that up and spit it out in 4K. Of course people responded. Of course it got heated. But instead of owning that moment, instead of holding that line or walking it back with a bit of self-awareness, the conversation turned into a pity party for female athletes who are never taken seriously. Sorry, but you can't have it both ways. You don't get to throw hands and then pretend you were just stretching. And this wasn't just a random hot take. It came from a two-time WNBA MVP. That holds weight. Wilson's platform matters. Her voice carries. So when she says something like that, it isn't just a personal opinion. It's a message. And when that message gets clowned, countered, or outright challenged, you can't cry foul and accuse everyone being triggered or obsessed. Let's go back to Beverly for a second. His response was almost comical in how deliberately performative it was. The guy basically said, yeah, I could cook NBA dudes. And for what? To look like an ally? To avoid criticism? Or just to stir the pot and boost engagement? Whatever his intent was, it clearly wasn't rooted in reality. Because no serious hooper, no one who's actually played at the NBA level, really believes that. Patrick Beverley doesn't even believe that. He's a defensive dog in the NBA, known more for his trash talk than his stat sheet. And yet here he is pretending like a 6'4" WNBA forward could lock horns with NBA players, many of whom are faster, stronger, longer, and, let's be honest, play in a completely different stratosphere athletically. But here's where it gets wild. Michael Porter Jr. calls it out. Brutally, yes, but honestly. And suddenly that's the double standard in action. Porter Jr. wasn't sugarcoating. He wasn't trying to tiptoe around feelings. He came with a take rooted in his actual experience. And the internet lost its mind. Why? Because he dared to say what a lot of people were thinking, but were too scared to voice. His comment about destroying women in basketball since the 8th grade hit a nerve. And yeah, it was a little rough. But what do people expect? He's a pro athlete, not a PR-trained diplomat. His job isn't to preserve egos. His job is to play ball. And if you come for the league he plays in, don't be surprised when he claps back. Still, the pivot from fair response to sexist attack happened fast. Too fast. Suddenly, the conversation wasn't about who could beat who. It was about masculinity, misogyny, and male fragility. People were acting like Porter Jr. just stormed into the WNBA's group chat and started roasting people unprovoked. He didn't. He responded, just like Teague, just like Jason Williams, just like a dozen other male athletes who didn't pander, didn't sugarcoat, and didn't pretend like this wasn't a ridiculous claim on its face. But now, it's been turned into a morality debate. And let's talk about Angel McCree again, because her response is where the discourse really lost the plot. She came in swinging, not just at the takes, but at men in general. She dropped a whole monologue, angry and emotional, filled with sweeping statements about male insecurity, gender roles, and how hard women have it in the sports world. And yes, we get it. Women in sports do face unique challenges. But McCree didn't even attempt to address the actual issue. She skipped past the source of the drama and decided to dunk on men for being men. She brought up domestic labor, biological differences, mental load, everything except the original claim. It was like someone asked, "Can Aya Wilson beat NBA players one-on-one?" And the answer came back, "Well, women give birth and raise kids and still show up to practice, so checkmate." What? That's not how debates work. That's not how facts work. You don't get to change the subject every time the argument doesn't go your way. And the irony is that by dodging the point, McCree actually made things worse. She turned a competitive conversation into a gender war. She gave people an excuse to stop listening. And she made it that much harder to have real conversations about what equity in sports should look like. Because now it's all noise. Now, if you criticize a female athlete statement, you're part of the problem. Now, if you respond to a wild take with honesty, you're obsessed. No, what's actually happening is accountability. And there's not nearly enough of it going around. She made the claim. She wasn't misquoted. She wasn't baited. She said what she said. And once it caught fire, the entire internet started pretending it didn't happen the way it happened. That men started the drama. That male athletes were just randomly weighing in to hate. That this was all about protecting fragile egos. It's exhausting. Because at the end of the day, no one's saying women shouldn't be confident. No one's saying women can't compete. But confidence isn't immunity from criticism. If you step up and say you can take on elite NBA players, people are going to call that out. It's not hate. It's Wilson, honestly. It's disappointing to see how quickly that nuance gets lost. Because the truth is, there are powerful women in sports. Women who deserve respect. Women who are breaking records, building legacies, and redefining their games. Aya Wilson is one of them. She's had an incredible career. But this moment, it wasn't about empowering women. It was about ego, about trying to punch up without preparing for the punchback. And when it hit, everyone scattered. Everyone suddenly forgot what was said. Suddenly, it was about male sensitivity and society's failings, and whatever else could fill the airwaves long enough to bury the original quote. But we're not doing that here. Not on this channel. We're going to say what actually happened. Aya Wilson made a statement that couldn't hold up. Male athletes responded. Some lied to make her look good. Some told the truth and got dragged for it. And the entire debate became a lesson in how quickly facts get rewritten when emotions take over. And the worst part? This whole mess could have been a productive moment. A chance to talk about athletic standards. About what real equality in sports could look like. About how to push women's leagues forward without relying on gimmicks or clickbait statements. But nope, it turned into a finger-pointing free-for-all. So now we're left with noise. With Michael Porter Jr. being painted as some kind of villain for saying what anyone who's played high-level ball already knows. With Angel McCree delivering TED Talks about gender dynamics instead of addressing the actual topic. And with Aya Wilson walking away from the spotlight, she turned on herself like none of it ever happened. But it did happen, and it exposed more than just the double standards in how men and women are allowed to speak in sports. It exposed how quick people are to shield someone from criticism just because they're popular or because their message fits a preferred narrative. We've got to do better. We got to stop pretending that being a woman in sports means you're above critique. That disagreement equals disrespect. That truth has to take a back seat to feelings. Because the moment we stop being honest, we stop making progress. Wilson. So yeah, Aya Wilson claims she could beat NBA players. That's on her. The responses? That's on the internet. The backlash to the backlash? That's where it all spiraled. And now, the real story, the truth, has to claw its way back to the surface. And honestly, the fact that we even have to clarify this is wild. We're talking about professional sports, where competition, trash talk, and ego are part of the culture. It's expected. When NBA player claims they dominate overseas, nobody flinches. When NFL guys say they walk onto an NBA court and cook, it's laughed off or debated like any other hot take. But the second Aya Wilson makes a claim that directly pits herself against NBA players, the rules change. Suddenly, disagreeing with her isn't part of the game. It's a problem. It's toxic. It's sexist? No, it's not. It's reacting to a claim that demands a response. That's what's been lost in this whole storm of think pieces, defensive rants, and over-the-top fan reactions. Somewhere along the way, we stopped treating Wilson's comment like a sports take and started treating it like a sacred statement that must not be touched. That's not equality. That's immunity. And it sets the conversation back, not forward. Because here's the thing, equality in sports means equal footing. That includes the spotlight, the praise, the pressure, and the pushback. If you're going to step into the debate and say you could go head-to-head with NBA-level athletes, you've got to be prepared for people, especially other athletes, to call that bluff. Instead, we got a wave of denial. People insisting that this was never about IAS statement, that it was about men just hating on women for no reason. Really? So now Porter Jr., a guy who was literally named in the conversation, responding to that conversation. Is the aggressor? That's just revisionist history. What happened here is simple. Wilson made a bold move. A lot of people didn't agree. Some pandered. Some pushed back. And the second that pushback got real, the narrative flipped. Now the men are obsessed. The women are under attack. And no one wants to admit that this entire mess could have been avoided with a little accountability. The moment Wilson made her claim, she set the tone. And honestly, that's fine. Be bold. Be confident. But you don't get to flip the narrative when it doesn't go your way. You don't get to duck under the cover of gender politics when people start asking real questions. If you're going to claim the spotlight, stand in it. So, let's stop pretending this was anything other than what it was. A bold statement followed by expected backlash, followed by a scramble to dodge the responsibility of that statement. And if that makes people uncomfortable, good. Discomfort is where real conversations begin. Drop a comment if you're tired of the bait and switch. Hit that like button if you think honesty shouldn't be optional, and subscribe for more raw, no-spin breakdowns of the internet's most chaotic moments. Because around here, we don't do revisionist drama. We just tell it how it went down.